You're listening to the Mother to Baby podcast, medications and more during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Ask the experts with your host, genetic counselor and mom of four, Chris Stallman.
Welcome to another episode of the Mother to Baby podcast. My name is Chris Stallman, and I am a genetic counselor, a mother of four, and a beagle. And I'm a teratogen information specialist. So what I do, along with my colleagues, is give information to people who are curious about exposures during pregnancy, during breastfeeding, before pregnancy, and in cases of adoption. And an exposure can be anything. So it can be a medication, it could be alcohol, it could be a vaccine. There's lots of different things that can be exposures and many, many different kinds of questions that we answer. On today's show, we're going to pivot a little bit and talk specifically about postpartum depression. And for this episode, we have a very special guest that we are thrilled to have with us. Dr. Jessica Vernon is an assistant professor at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine and a board-certified OBGYN. She is also the obstetric director of perinatal mental health at NYU Langone and the physician advisor for the Black Motherhood Matters Committee at NYU. In her personal time, she's also a mom, a writer, and an advisor for startups focusing on women's mental and emotional health. She writes with the goal to help other moms feel empowered and supported throughout their transition to motherhood. She has a blog that can be found on Substack. She has a website called Metamorphosis to Mom, and you can connect with her on LinkedIn and Instagram. Dr. Vernon, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
So my understanding is that we found you through your appearance on the Today Show with Hoda and Jenna. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about how you hooked up with them?
So I was introduced to them through the PR department at NYU. I have done a few articles discussing my personal journey with postpartum depression and bringing awareness to the general public about this very important and very prevalent issue in women during pregnancy and postpartum. And during the month of Mother's Day, Hoda and Jenna wanted to provide some other support for moms in different ways. So they came across my article and asked me to be on the show, and that's how it happened.
That is excellent. And I did see the clip. I have read the article. But the reason that you're here today is to share your experience with our listeners. So whenever you're ready.
Sure. So my experience started soon after my daughter was born. I had a really uncomplicated pregnancy. My delivery was overall okay. I was prepared for most of the things that would happen during pregnancy and postpartum from a physical standpoint, because I am an OBGYN physician and have been practicing and caring for women for about a decade. But I wasn't prepared for all of the emotional and mental changes, and actually didn't even recognize that what I was experiencing was postpartum depression for a very long time, because most of my symptoms started out as anxiety. So I just thought it was the heightened awareness of a new mom going home where my mind was always racing. I had what we call intrusive thoughts, or thoughts of something bad happening to the baby, like being dropped or drowning or hitting their head or stopping to breathe, to where I really had trouble even falling asleep when the baby was sleeping, because I was constantly worried that something would happen. So I was checking on her very regularly. I also was very overwhelmed, and it was hard for me to even contemplate leaving the house with her, of all the things I'd have to get ready. And what if she had a meltdown when we were outside, or we had trouble feeding and she was outside. I didn't really know how to ask for help. I'm very type A physician, and I'm used to running around and multitasking and doing everything for myself. And so I thought it was my job to just handle everything. And so this took a toll on me, and I became very exhausted. I wasn't eating well. I became very irritable. And all of these are signs of postpartum anxiety and depression, and I just didn't know. So this went on for a while, and I just kept thinking, this is what it's like to be a new mom. It will get better over time. But instead of getting better, it just got worse. And by the time she was around a year and she was walking and eating everything, and then I was constantly worried about her choking or falling and hitting her head or something else terrible happening. And then that was when my symptoms started to be compounded by depression, because I got to the point where I was thinking this is how my life was going to be forever. And then I just wasn't getting as much enjoyment out of things. I was so exhausted. My brain was getting foggy. My nerves had been on edge this whole time, and I still wasn't sleeping well. But still at that point, I didn't realize something was wrong. I just still thought this was what was being a new mom was like. And it took until I was in New York working as a doctor in the epicenter of the COVID pandemic before I became so run down and my symptoms so bad that I really was struggling functioning throughout the day. I was still going to work and caring for my patients, but I couldn't multitask. It was harder and harder to have the energy to get through my day. And that's when I finally realized something was seriously wrong. I didn't know if it was an autoimmune disorder like my thyroid, or if there was something more serious going on like a cancer, but I did know that my nerves were on edge, and I was so stressed about worrying about my child and me bringing home COVID from the hospital that I went to my primary care doctor and asked for an anti-anxiety medication. And once I started on that, I was able to get the space and perspective I needed to realize what was really going on with me. And then staying on the medication and getting more help with therapy and other mindfulness resources like meditation and yoga. That's when I really got better and was able to look back and see that I had really been suffering from anxiety and depression the whole time.
You know, you said something that really resonated with me. Your description of the anxiety. I myself, I've had 4 children. I've had postpartum depression before. I knew the warning signs. We knew to look out for them, XYZ. But what you described about the fear of putting the baby down, leaving the baby alone, even for a millisecond. And that anxiety, when I heard that, when I read that description, I was like, wait a second, wait. That's part of it. I still, to this day, until, just a couple weeks ago when I read about your account, I did not put together in my mind that the extreme anxiety I felt about all 4 of my kids going to sleep and not waking up, even into their second or third years of life, that anxiety was related. I had never known that. I never put it together. And thank you so much for putting that out there, because we do talk more about postpartum depression than ever before. That doesn't mean it's well recognized. It does not mean that there's not a stigma attached. But I think that anxiety piece is something that most people don't think of in this context. So I really appreciated you putting that out there.
Thank you. Yes, and you are definitely not alone, Chris. A majority of my patients, I would say, that I'm caring for now present more with anxiety symptoms than depressive symptoms. And it is so common, and this is why we have now changed the terminology from calling it postpartum depression to calling it perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, because we do see a whole spectrum, and sometimes the anxiety gets to the point where you can have obsessive compulsive disorder. And I've often seen and heard from moms who, even when I'm trying to encourage them to get a break and take a nap, have someone else watch the baby for a little bit, they are so worried that somebody else cannot watch their baby as they can. And so they won't even take a break and have even a family member watch the baby for half an hour. And so just getting to that point even really can take some work for a lot of new moms. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong or abnormal with them. This is just part of the struggles of having postpartum anxiety.
Absolutely. And what did it feel like as a physician? I mean, you're an OB, you work with pregnant people all the time. How did it feel that initially you were not able to pinpoint that this was postpartum anxiety?
Oh, it it felt really it felt really sad to me knowing that I am someone who has access to so many resources, so much education. I have the privileges of a physician who has the ability to get therapy and medication, and I have a great support system, and I didn't even know, and those around me didn't know. And so to think about all of the people out there who were suffering without themselves knowing, or they had symptoms but they felt too guilty or felt that they would be judged for talking about their symptoms, it just felt really heavy, the magnitude of this problem. And that is why I am so passionate now about increasing awareness and helping other moms so they don't struggle like I did.
And do you find in your practice that you receive questions about postpartum depression, or do you need to start that conversation with your patients?
Yeah, that is a really great question, because the interesting part is I often don't get questions. And even at an initial prenatal visit, when I'm first meeting new moms and we're talking about history, often if I don't ask if they have a history of anxiety or depression or anything else that might make them high risk, it's not something that's often volunteered. And when women develop symptoms, a lot of times, because they don't have the baseline awareness, such as both you and I, they don't know to come forward and say, I'm suffering from this. And the second factor is there is still such a huge stigma and shame surrounding mental health that besides the outside pressure from society to have this perfect story of pregnancy and motherhood, there's so much internal pressure. And so moms feel really bad saying that they're having symptoms and that they're not fitting that perfect narrative. And they have so much shame and guilt and feel like a bad mom. And then there's also a lot of moms who are worried because of their racial identity, sociodemographic backgrounds, that if they come forward, their child might be taken from them. Right. They might be put in a hospital. Child protective services are called. And so it's really sad that so many women, even if they do know they're suffering, won't come forward because they're worried about all of these things surrounding the mental health conversation.
Absolutely right. You know, we do these podcasts and I love to talk about my family and my experiences, but I got to be honest, I thought long and hard before sharing the fact that I've had postpartum depression. And again, it's sort of part of that, like you said, that ingrained thing. I don't want anyone to think that I don't love my children. Of course I do. And so much in my mind, I equate depression, with sadness, and I wasn't ever sad to have them, but there were things out of my control. And I agree that stigma is still there for all of us and for many, many different reasons. So I'm really glad, to bring some more awareness, I should say, to this topic.
Right. And even for moms who aren't suffering from postpartum depression or anxiety, there are always going to be days during your pregnancy or postpartum where you just feel like you want to leave it all and run away, and the baby's crying and won't stop, or you're exhausted and you're being tortured by breastfeeding or struggling with feeding. And that is all natural. It's not anything to be ashamed of. It doesn't mean you don't love your baby. It doesn't mean you're not meant to be a mom. These are, we're all human, and it's a really tough job. It's really hard, and pregnancy can be very hard for a lot of people as well, not just postpartum.
So, Dr. Vernon, I'm sure you've heard the term baby blues. What, in your opinion, is the difference between baby blues and perinatal mood disorders?
Sure. So baby blues is almost universal. About 85% of new moms have baby blues. It's not a disorder. It's not an illness. It comes from the dramatic drop in hormones that happen immediately after delivery. This is when moms are typically saying, I'm crying and I don't know why. Right. You go from being happy to being sad, and it can fluctuate in short periods of time. This resolves within 1 to 2 weeks after delivery. So if after that time period you are still having symptoms of feeling sad or depressed or just not really enjoying things or any of the other symptoms I was describing earlier. If this continues, it gets worse, please reach out for help because those are symptoms of a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder.
And who would you suggest that people reach out to? So should it be their OB, their primary provider, their baby's pediatrician?
It can be any of those, honestly, whoever you feel comfortable reaching out to. It can even be a friend, someone in your support system. You can go online if you don't feel comfortable or you don't feel that you're getting the support you need from your provider. I've had so many moms tell me stories of their doctors just saying, oh, you'll get over it. Just go out for a walk with the baby, or it'll get better in a few weeks. And so if you feel like you're not getting the response you need and the care you need, please feel empowered to keep reaching out to others. Postpartum Support International is a huge online resource, and they can connect you to care in your area, including psychiatrists, therapists. They also have free weekly support groups. So even if you can't find someone where you are who understands these disorders and can help you get access to care, please go online. You can also always reach out to me via social media as well.
And that's such a great reminder. I mean, again, in the old school, I think about, reach out to who's local to you. But you're right, the internet has opened so many doors for things that are not available, especially in rural areas or after hours. People are busy, and during the daytime, it may be more difficult. So thank you for that reminder. Speaking of the internet, can you tell us about your website, Metamorphosis to Mom?
Sure. Metamorphosis to Mom is a little project that I created last year. I was noticing that at visits with patients, they were asking about a lot of different resources for things, or I was just offering up resources based on how they were feeling and what seemed to be concerns for them. So I wanted to give them some basic access to some of my favorite recommendations from websites, books, podcasts. I also have my personal blog on there, as well as some other resources from other experts, just to help moms feel less alone and know that there are resources out there for them.
Absolutely. And Dr. Vernon, is there any final thought that you would like to leave our audience with today?
Sure. So as your website does focus a lot on exposures in pregnancy and breastfeeding, I think it is so important for moms to know, one, that this resource is out there, and so they can be empowered with the proper information. Your information is amazing and up to date and covers all of the first-line medications that I would recommend for patients with anxiety or depression in pregnancy and breastfeeding. But beyond that, I want people who are suffering and their families, because a lot of times the judgment and shame comes from those around us, even those we love. I want everyone to know that we should be thinking about medications for mental health the same way we would for medications for high blood pressure or diabetes or any other condition you developed in pregnancy or postpartum, that your doctor would say, I think you should start this medication. It will help both you and your baby have better outcomes. And this is so true for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. Medications can improve outcomes for both mom and baby, and they should not be viewed as medications for any other condition. So you should always look at the risks of an untreated anxiety or depression or other mood disorder versus the risks of an untreated condition and how that can affect mom and baby, not just mom, but baby as well. Also, a lot of moms are willing to start a low dose of medication, but then they don't want to increase the dose. And the goal is to have the lowest effective dose. So you want to get the treatment you need. If you're undertreated, then you're being exposed to the risks of the anxiety or depression. And then you're also being exposed to the risks of the medication. So it's really important that if you don't have a care team that's comfortable having these conversations, besides going on sites like MotherToBaby to look at the risks yourself, really advocate until you find a provider who has the comfort and knowledge to have these conversations and help you decide the best course for you.
Dr. Vernon, thank you again. And, actually, on the next episode, we are going to talk about some medications that are commonly used to treat depression and anxiety in breastfeeding specifically. Dr. Vernon, would you come back and chat with our audience about that as well?
Sure, I would love to.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. We're very happy to hear your story, and we will talk to you again very soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. And that does it for this episode of the Mother to Baby podcast. Thank you, as always, for joining us, and we hope that you will join us again in the future. And in the meantime, if you have a question or you want to be on the podcast, we would love to hear from you. So please feel free to email us at contactus@mothertobaby.org. And of course, Mother to Baby is here to help with your questions about exposures during pregnancy and breastfeeding. You can call us at 866-626-6847. You can text us at 855-999-3525. You can visit our website at mothertobaby.org, where you can find all of our fact sheets, our baby blogs, previous episodes of our podcast, and you can also chat live with a Mother to Baby specialist. Make sure you subscribe to the Mother to Baby podcast. That way you never miss a new episode. Or in case you want to go back and listen to some older episodes, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, or however you do podcasts. So until next time, thank you for being part of our podcast today. And remember, Mother to Baby is here for you. Take care.
Mother to Baby is a service of the nonprofit organization of Teratology Information Specialists and supported by the Health Resources and Service Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's made possible through generous donations from listeners like you. To learn more about Mother to Baby, please visit mothertobaby.org.